Hey everybody, Matt LaPlante here with another video for you. This time we're going to go over something called paper gains. Many of you have probably heard of paper losses, but most of you have probably never heard of the term paper gains. Now, paper losses is something that a lot of people will talk about when it comes to when you're invested in something. If you're invested in something and it goes down, they say, oh, it's just a paper loss because that unless you sell it, it's not really a loss. You haven't realized that loss yet. Well, there's something called a paper gain. And the paper gain is essentially the opposite of that. When things go up, well, you didn't really have a gain unless you actually sold it and realized that gain. So there are issues with paper losses that people run into, and just like there's some issues with paper gains, a thing that is very rarely talked about. But we're going to go over that in this video because it's important given the time that we're in. So let's talk about paper gains and some of the issues that can arise as a result of them. All right, so what we're looking at here is the S&P 500, and what the S&P 500 is, it's essentially the largest 500 stocks in the U.S. And so I did this on Yahoo Finance so that really, if anybody wants to go on and reproduce this and take a look for whatever reason, by all means do it. So this is looking at really 13 years starting in 1985, running to 1998, and what you're seeing is the S&P 500, really this is kind of just looking at the stock market in general, think of it like that, returned almost tenfold, because this is down around 150 or so, between over that 13-year period. That's a significant run up in the stock market. Those are what we call paper gains if you've actually held on to those holdings and things like that over that time period. You haven't realized them yet. That was followed by this. 1998, we continued to see the rally, but then we saw the tech wreck happen. Really cratered out there, rallied again, great financial crisis, crater, and back up. But what I want to really point out here in this is where we started, and this is where we ended. The stock market really didn't go anywhere over those 13 years. Prior to 13, a lot of growth. Next 13, really nothing really to speak of. And most people don't invest because they're thinking, hey, you know what? I want to make no money on my investments. That's not why we're doing this. And so I want to use this to keep in mind when we go over this next example, because we do tend to have cycles like this where we have really good returns followed by mediocre returns. And so a lot of times when we're in moments like this, we think, oh, the party's always going to go on. We're always going to get 20%, 30% return every year like clockwork. Doesn't really work that way. And so let's jump here. So this is looking at I just completely made this up. There's two people, both have $100,000. And over the course of these 5 years, this is how much that would have grown to based on this return rate, this just made up return rate. And so let's focus on the second person right now. So the second person, they started with 100,000, got a big return in year one, 30%. And so they're really excited versus the other person who just got a steady 7%. Not that you could even get steady 7 or anything like that, but just stick with me for now. Person who got the 30%, the reason why this is important is that there's 3 groups of people that I see will have issues when this happens and have the issues with the paper gains. They are saving for retirement, they're getting very close to retirement, or they're in retirement. And the first one, the saver, what they'll see is they'll go, wow, I had this plan to have X amount of assets, and I'm way ahead now. I'm way ahead. So now what I'm going to do is, because I'm so far ahead, I made 30% in that first year, I don't need to save as much. I'm going to start spending more on other things. I don't have to worry about it because I'm going to keep getting that 30% or 20% like clockwork. The next person is the person who's getting ready to retire. They see this big return in that year and they're thinking, ooh, you know what? I'm going to retire early because I'm going to be able to get that return. It's going to be great. Everything's going to be fine. And then the retiree thinks, the third person is the retiree who thinks, I just made all this money. I got way more money to spend now this year. Well, as you can see, if you spent all of that return that you got here and didn't stick to your plan, you're not necessarily going to get that 30% every year. And you need that to fund your future years if we have lean years here. So keep that in mind. sometimes we have these big years, these big paper gain years, and that can lead people to think they're much better off than what they are. Now, I don't want to, pour cold water on you, but keep that in mind. Stick to the plan because we don't know what the future holds. So we got to make sure that we don't spend all of our gains, all of those paper gains, before we're going to need them in the future. So keep that in mind. Thanks. I'll see you guys next time.